Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It's the final day of the Premier League season, all games kicking off at the same time. And if you're anything like us, well, your head's probably spinning with all the possibilities.
It really is. It's the kind of day where, you almost need a guide through the chaos. And that's what we try to do here, right? You bring us the sources and we dive in, try and pull out the absolute core of what you need to know.
Absolutely. And today's source material is, well, it's perfect for this moment. We've got an article from Alex Keeble titled 10 Key Questions for This Weekend's Matches. It came out May 23rd, 2025, and it's laser focused on this incredibly dramatic match week 38.
Yeah, he really lays out the biggest talking points, doesn't he? Breaks down some specific tactical things for the crucial games and sort of gives us his take on how things might realistically play out.
So our mission for this deep dive
Mhm.
is to take that article, pull out those key questions, the analysis behind them, and, piece together the picture Alex Keeble paints for this final kind of wild afternoon of football. I mean, where else do you even begin but with the absolute madness happening just outside the very top spots?
Okay, let's unpack this because it really is the headline drama, and for good reason. The article highlights the situation, calls it unprecedented, actually. Going into the final day, just 3 points, separate third place, all the way down to seventh.
3 points. That's basically one result deciding potentially everything for 5 different clubs.
Yeah,
And the article names them. You got Man City in third on 68 points.
right.
Then Newcastle and Chelsea, both level on 66 points in fourth and fifth. Aston Villa also on 66 and sixth. And then Nottingham Forest right behind them, seventh on 65 points.
It's incredible. You've got 3 teams locked together on points, one just a single point behind them, and the team actually in third only 2 points clear of fourth place. It's so tight.
And the really crucial insight Alex Keeble drills into here is that any 3 of these 5 clubs, they can still qualify for the UEFA Champions League. It's not like, oh, there are 2 spots left. No, it's a 5-way scramble for 3 places.
Which raises a pretty important question straight away, doesn't it? How does this, unprecedented congestion actually impact the games themselves on the final day?
Which brings us neatly to the specific matches Alex highlights within this seal race. The first one he really zooms in on is Nottingham Forest versus Chelsea.
Yeah, he calls this the 6-pointer that, neutral should absolutely be glued to. And the analysis points to a few key things maybe favoring Forest. Playing at the City ground, that's obvious.
Big advantage.
Huge. But crucially, Chelsea's away form gets highlighted. They're apparently 11th in the league for away form, which is, well, it's frankly terrible. Just 1 win in their last 11 away games.
1 win in 11. Wow.
And that was against Fulham, and I think it was a late winner too, so it's not convincing.
That is a telling stat, isn't it? And the tactical bit from the article points out that Maresca's style for Chelsea, that possession-heavy approach, it can sometimes be a bit, well, the article says sterile and sideways, especially when they face well-organized teams set up to counterattack, particularly away. It even references the 1-1 draw earlier in the season at Stamford Bridge. Chelsea had loads of the ball, but Forest were effective when they broke.
And what's fascinating here is the contrast in what's at stake. For Forest, the article frames Champions League qualification as this sort of wonderful bonus. Great if it happens. But for Chelsea, after all the money they've spent, it's presented as more of a necessity.
Yeah.
And you have to wonder what that psychological weight does, especially if the game gets tight, gets nervy. Although the author does say a Chelsea win is still plausible if things get nervy.
So what's the verdict then? What's the forecast for this potential nail-biter?
Well, it's pretty much deemed too close to call. But the analysis finishes by saying, and I quote, "At least one of these clubs will be devastated, and possibly both," which really captures the high-stakes nature perfectly.
Okay, flipping over to another really crucial CL contender match, Manchester United hosting Aston Villa. Now, the interesting angle the article takes here isn't just about Villa's form, which is good, but it's about the team news at Manchester United.
Yeah, Alex says Villa fans will be sort of holding their breath waiting for Ruben Amorim's team sheet. The big question mark is how United react to that Europa League defeat they had midweek. Does Amorim rotate heavily, put out a youthful side, basically say our European season's done? Or does he pick his strongest available team and demand a reaction, an apology performance for the home fans?
That adds such a layer of uncertainty for Villa, doesn't it? I mean, their own the article notes, is good, and they're chasing something quite significant, only their second win at Old Trafford since, 2009?
Exactly, but, and this is the key thing, even a win might not be enough for Villa. The article makes it really clear. They need the victory plus help from elsewhere.
Right.
Either Newcastle or Chelsea have to drop points, or Manchester City must lose. They're relying on other results going their way, even if they do their own job perfectly.
Yeah. And, regardless of the CL outcome, the article does acknowledge Villa have had an excellent season, securing a third straight year in Europe. But you can tell, Champions League, that would be the next level they're absolutely desperate for.
Which, raises another interesting question about the final day dynamic. Does having that really clear, tangible objective, does that override other factors like form or opponent uncertainty?
Which kind of leads us perfectly to the third key CL race match the article breaks down, Newcastle United against Everton. Alex actually poses the possibility of an upset here.
Yeah, he points to Everton playing without the same kind of pressure. That emotional farewell at Goodison Park last week might have taken a lot out of them. Maybe they can play with a bit more freedom. But Newcastle, they have their own potential issues highlighted too.
Like what?
Well, there's an injury doubt over Isak, which, has hurt them before when he's been out, and a potential tactical question mark. They used a reactive 3-4-3 against Chelsea and Liverpool recently, but at home, they'll likely go back to a more proactive 4-3-3.
And the analysis suggests that switch could impact the midfield balance.
Exactly. With Joe Willock just back from injury, likely in that central three, the question Alex raises is whether they can match the sheer physicality of Everton's midfield. Guy, Garner, Doucoure especially, as Newcastle looked a bit tired last weekend.
Okay. But the counter-argument must be Newcastle's home form, surely.
Oh, absolutely. The article stresses that. They play with, quote, fire and fury at St. James's Park, and they've won their last 6 home league matches. 6 in a row, and their objective couldn't be simpler. Win on Sunday, and they are back in the Champions League, full stop.
That clarity, that feels like a massive advantage on a day like this.
Yeah.
As Alex notes, often the team with something really concrete to play for finds a way against a team maybe without such a defined aim, like Everton potentially.
So the forecast kind of balances those points. Newcastle should have the upper hand is the verdict, but Everton will not make it easy. It's an analysis that really forces you to weigh that home advantage and motivation against potential tactical or physical weaknesses.
Right. And finally, in this Champions League race picture, we look at Fulham versus Manchester City. This one's framed as Man City's, their most deceptively difficult challenge among all the contenders.
Which is fascinating, isn't it? And Alex's reasoning is key here. He argues that Marco Silva's Fulham are tactically set up to compress space far better than a team like Bournemouth, who City recently beat quite convincingly.
Okay.
And this compression could lead to a more stilted and goal-shy Man City, maybe something mirroring their performance in the FA Cup final.
Well, that comparison to the FA Cup final certainly catches the eye. And the analysis even mentions that Haaland does not look like himself since returning from injury, which, increases the chance Fulham could frustrate City, maybe keep it 0-0 for a long time and make Pep Guardiola start sweating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, City only need to avoid defeat to guarantee Champions League football next season. So the bar isn't ridiculously high, and they are, obviously, the clear favorites, widely expected to get the job done against a Fulham side not fighting for Europe. But Alex's take is that City aren't there just yet. It's just a good reminder, isn't it, that even for the very best sides, final day nerves and specific tactical matchups can make things, tricky.
Okay, wow. So that unpacks that incredible 5-way battle for those 3 Champions League spots. Breaking down the key dynamics, the analyses for each of those critical matches, all according to Alex Keeble's article. But the article also reminds us that the final day drama isn't just confined to the top end of the table.
Right, exactly. He raises several other key questions across the rest of the league fixtures that add different kinds of layers to the afternoon. Take Liverpool versus Crystal Palace, for instance. The analysis says explicitly there's absolutely nothing riding on this in terms of, league outcomes or positions.
But there's still a narrative. Alex anticipates a huge end-of-term kind of feeling. A party atmosphere at Anfield, Liverpool might be anticipating a trophy presentation, Palace fans celebrating a strong finish to their season.
Yeah, and he suggests this relaxed setup could make for a brilliantly entertaining, maybe high-scoring match. He even throws out the wild idea of a hypothetical 5-5 thriller.
Okay. Any individual stakes?
Just one highlighted. Mo Salah apparently needs 2 goal involvement, goals or assists, to set some kind of Premier League record. So maybe a personal target there, but nothing affecting the teams.
Okay. Then you have a match with a very different kind of high stake. Southampton versus Arsenal. For Southampton, the focus is purely and grimly on avoiding an unwanted piece of history.
Yeah, they're currently tied with 4 other teams for the most losses ever in a single Premier League season, 29 defeats.
Ouch.
One more loss against Arsenal makes it 30, giving them the outright record all on their own, something they desperately want to avoid. The article mentions their recent 0-0 draw against Man City, where City had loads of shots, high XG, but were, quote, profligate, wasted chances.
And the forecast for avoiding that record against Arsenal.
Pretty stark, unfortunately. The prediction is that Arsenal, even with Mikel Arteta banned from the touchline, probably won't be as profligate as City were. Southampton are going to need, quote, a huge dose of luck to get anything and avoid that record. It's a pretty grim outlook, but it does highlight a specific, different kind of drama on the day.
Another team fighting an unwanted record, according to the article, is Ipswich Town, who are hosting West Ham. Alex points to Ipswich's really miserable home form, just one home win all season long, and that was way back on December 30th against Chelsea.
One home win all season. That's a joint record low in Premier League history. So for Ipswich, this final match, even though the season's been a disappointment overall, it's framed as their absolute final chance to end on some kind of high at home to give their fans something positive to remember. It's a different kind of stake again, isn't it? Focused purely on pride and that connection with the supporters.
Right. Then over at Spurs versus Brighton, the narrative is shaped by Tottenham riding the high of that Europa League final win against Man Ud earlier in the week. The article touches on Ange Postecoglou, saying he wants to stay and build for, 4, 5, or 6 years.
And there's a bit of a tactical tension highlighted here. Will Spurs maybe rest players after that huge effort in the final? That would actually be good news for Brighton, who need a point for 8th place and a potential shot at the Europa Conference League.
Or
will Postecoglou see this as a chance to really double down, showcase his desired expansive football, his Ange ball, even though, as Alex points out, Spurs won the Europa League final, playing pretty much the polar opposite of Ange ball. It feels like it's about momentum, setting a tone for next season, perhaps.
Okay. For Wolves hosting Brentford, the analysis gives Vitor Pereira credit for doing a generally good job since he took over, picking up a solid number of points.
Yeah.
They apparently had top 5 form for a decent stretch.
Yeah, but 3 defeats recently in their last 3 games have definitely taken the sheen off that run. So avoiding a 4th straight loss is highlighted as being quite important for morale, especially heading into what's described as an important summer for the club, with rumors swirling about key players like Matheus Cunha potentially moving on. They really need a result to avoid ending with a sort of slightly bitter aftertaste.
Makes sense. And finally, Bournemouth versus Leicester City. Bournemouth are apparently already planning for next season, and the core question Alex Keeble highlights for their manager, Iraola, is how they improve their home record.
Yeah, the analysis notes their specific issue, only 4 home wins since November, and apparently all of them were tight 1-0 wins where they had to really grind it out. Alex suggests they struggle when they're expected to be the progressive team at home, that they actually prefer being the underdogs who can counterattack, referencing those earlier wins against Arsenal and City.
Okay, and Leicester.
Leicester are described as a typically defensive opponent, the kind Bournemouth doesn't tend to enjoy playing against. They lost the reverse fixture 1-0. So figuring out how to break down these types of organized defensive teams at home is presented as a key tactical puzzle Iraola needs to solve before next season starts. And this game is sort of a final test case for that.
So, okay, putting it all together then, from this deep dive into Alex Keeble's piece, we get this picture of a final day that's just filled with simultaneous dramas, doesn't it? You've got the absolutely gripping 5-way fight for those 3 Champions League spots. Then you have individual teams battling desperately to avoid unwanted historical records, like most losses or fewest home wins.
Right, the pride factor.
Exactly. And then others who are playing more for momentum or maybe purely for pride or even just gathering tactical insights ahead of the summer and the next campaign. It's all happening at once.
He really does lay out the layered complexity of the final day, doesn't he? Shows it's so much more than just who wins the title or who goes down sometimes.
Yeah, this article really gives us so much to think about, so much to look for when those whistles blow at 3 p.m. on Sunday. Based on this analysis we've just unpacked together, what stands out to you the most listening to this? Which of these situations or maybe potential outcomes has you most intrigued now that you have this deeper dive into the analysis behind it all?
And maybe think about those different kinds of stakes that Alex Keeble highlights here. It's not just about the big, shiny prizes like winning trophies or qualifying for Europe's top competition. There's that very real pressure of avoiding those unwanted historical footnotes,
Hmm.
securing pride for the fans after maybe a tough season, or just finding some positive momentum to carry into the break. Does knowing about all these different layers of consequence, does that make the final day even more compelling for you?
Something to definitely mull over as you get ready for the final act of the Premier League season. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.